Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sara Carter Show. And I'm coming to you from Radio America today. Radio America, it's beautiful. I got Adam back. He's in the booth. Jenny's here with me. And today we have such a huge interview, such a huge day, breaking news everywhere. You know, I know our news has been just inundated with so much happening overseas. Iran, what's been happening in the Middle East with Iraq, the targeting of Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani. I can tell you, I've been on the ground both in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and the Quds Force, which is a terrorist organization, not just in my opinion, but designated terrorist organization of the United States, was involved in the deaths of so many Americans, thousands of American lives lost and maimed by this group that uses proxy groups as well to target U.S. As well as allied assets. And everybody knows Iran is a clear and present danger to the state of Israel. So much happening there. The President Donald Trump did such an amazing, decisive action when they took out Soleimani. Remember, this is all based on actionable intelligence. The United States knew for certain, and by the way, this is agreed upon by both Democrats and Republicans, that Soleimani was planning to target U.S. citizens and U.S. assets overseas, that he was planning to target them. He was working on an operation, and the United States did not let that happen. We did not have another Benghazi. And Soleimani, look, folks, he lived his life using the sword or fighting and killing and targeting people. He probably knew somewhere along the line that it would catch up with him and that he would one day meet his end the same way that he made so many other people suffer. So good riddance. Now it's just moving forward, and now it's figuring out what we do from here. Do we want a war? No, of course, nobody wants war. But we sent a direct message to Iran. We sent a direct message to North Korea and to other nation states that if you target the United States and if you mess with their allies, that this president means action, and he's not going to sit back. But I don't want to get into all of that because I have a huge guest on our show, and I know I've said huge over and over again. I'll find a new word, a new adjective to use with you, but I'm so excited to have on the show, and I just interviewed ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes. He is an extraordinary human being who has really worked to be above and beyond to get to the truth on what happened with the FBI's investigation into the Trump campaign and the now debunked, theory that it colluded with Russia. If it wasn't for Congressman Nunes, we would be in the dark. I know that I worked in the beginning along with John Solomon and a few other reporters out there to expose the unmaskings of American citizens, to focus in on the FBI and what it was doing with regards to the investigation, broke a lot of stories on former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, as well as the General Counsel, James Baker, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and others involved like Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie Orr. I can go on and on about the people that were involved in this attempted, what I believe was an attempted coup of a U.S. president, or to stop President Trump from ever becoming the nominee for office. So this is still in existence today. We still see the same people pushing the same debunked theories. Now they're trying to impeach the president. So I talked to Devin Nunes a lot about that. But I also break news with Devin Nunes. This is about breaking news here. There is some really important information that Devin delivers in this interview. It's about a 40-minute interview. I can't even believe I got him on for that long. I was telling him only 20 minutes. I promise you only 20 minutes. And then we just start talking, and it's like chit-chat, It's like when you hate your mom and your kid and you're pulling on her arm and she's on the phone and she's promising you only 10 minutes and she keeps going and it's like an hour-long conversation. That's kind of what happened to Devin and I. Thank God Jenny wasn't tagging on my arm too much. She kept saying, I think you guys got to wrap it up now. And we just kept going. And I'm glad I did. Because the congressman was able to touch on areas, specifically areas that we haven't heard from much lately. In specific, and I'll give you a hint, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, Michael Atkinson. What could Congressman Nunes have said about Michael Atkinson? You are going to want to hear that. And remember, go to my website, saracarter.com. Right, Jenny? I'm going to bring Jenny in on this for a minute. I'm going to let her talk because she's just been sitting here quietly and patiently. And Adam has been in the control booth quietly and patiently listening to me chit-chat away for the last hour with the congressman. Jenny, what did you think of that interview with Congressman Nunes?
I think a lot of people are going to have to listen to it. And there's some, like you said, breaking news. It's really going to change things and turn the tide on a lot of these investigations.
Right. I think so, too. And I think there are things that are happening, particularly with with Attorney General William Barr and John Durham, that are so significant right now. We know that it's a developing investigation, a criminal probe. A criminal probe, everyone. This is not just about writing a report. This is a probe into what happened, into this, I believe, which was an attempted coup to unseat a president of the United States. And I want to throw Adam in here. Adam, what did you think? Adam's working the control booth today. What did you get from that interview? Were you?
I'll tell you what, I'm pushing all the buttons over here, but anytime I see your face light up like that and your eyes just go big like, oh my goodness, I know that we just broke something. So
yeah,
you guys are
right.
just going to want to sit back and enjoy this one.
Yeah, that's right. And I did a little dance. So I'm going to bring the congressman on. Remember, he is not just the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. He's also a member of the Ways and Means Committee. He has a podcast. It's incredible. If you haven't downloaded it, you must. It's the Devin Nunes podcast. And you know what? It's only like 20 minutes long. Whenever he does it, it's like 20 minutes long, but you learn something new. He's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about CNN and his lawsuit against CNN and other media outlets, as well as Twitter, and why he did it and what he wants to expose. I mean, it's just crazy what some of these news outlets that we trusted, have done, and the type of garbage, basically, that they've put out there as news that's completely false and fake, and that they refuse to retract, even when they have the information that the stories are wrong. So I want you to listen to this interview. It's incredible. It's the ranking member, again, of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, and you are not going to want to miss this. Congressman Nunes, thank you so much for joining us. And by the way, first of all, I'd like to say congratulations on the Devin Nunes podcast. You are up there in the top 20. I am so excited to talk to you and have you on my podcast, The Sara Carter Show. But first, I want to ask you one really important question that's been bothering me for a while.
All right.
Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it Nunes?
Nunes is correct. That's right. Yeah, a lot of people, So it's actually an interesting name. So a lot of people think it's Nunes, which is the Spanish version of my name, except that my family is from Portugal, actually the Azores Islands. So the way we've Americanized it is Nunes, and it would be pronounced slightly different in Portuguese, but for the most part, most people with my name say Nunes. But
I am a guilty party, Congressman.
But we're totally fine. Like, yeah, I know a lot of people say that, but it's not a wrong translation. It's just Spanish versus Portuguese.
That's right. So it's like, yeah, it's my team against your team.
It's the same name, and it actually originates from kind of a central part on the Spanish and Portuguese border.
Well, at least I know that all my listeners will now get your name correct. Nunes. It is Nunes, everyone out there who's listening to this. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I have been wanting to get you on here for quite some time, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your podcast because, as I said in the intro, you know, you have really climbed your way to the top in the podcast world, especially in politics. Can you tell me a little bit about, you know, everybody has a podcast now. So what makes your podcast different than everyone else's? Why should we be listening to you?
Well, the reason that I originally created a podcast was to, surprise, surprise, I know we'll probably talk about this later, was to essentially just ignore the media so that I could go straight to my constituents and straight to anyone around the country who wanted to hear good information. And what's interesting, I think, about my podcast is it's not about me. So normally what I'm doing is I'm interviewing someone who is – what I prefer to do is I'm kind of a policy guy at heart. So I do what most people would think are, not real sexy topics, but I think where people can listen in for 10, 15, 20 minutes a week, because normally we don't go any longer than that. But we have very interesting topics. So we've done, like last year, we did 4 different podcasts just talking about the past, present, and future of the United States Navy, right?
Wow.
So bring on a retired Navy captain. He spends, and we did one week we did PACOM in the Pacific, which I know you're familiar with, and then another time we talked about the Atlantic. We talked about the Atlantic during World War II. Then we talked about kind of where we're at, how many more ships do we need to build. So it can be a little geeky, but it's not so geeky that we spend an hour on it, right? Like some podcasts, I think they just go too long. Like nobody wants to hear about the U.S. Navy for 3 hours.
That's right. I know. But giving your listeners 20 minutes of a topic that we're not hearing much about, and particularly, well, both you and I know that our national media right now is really heavily focused, and for the last 3.5 years, of course, on Russia and impeachment now, Ukraine, those issues. And of course, right now, I think the biggest news topic is Iran. So having a place where people...
Well, and that's a good time. And so that's another thing. So we were talking about Iran. We had quite a few topics. So I did the history of Al-Qaeda. That was one of the things I had like a 2-part series on the history of Al-Qaeda. I brought on, Tom Jocelyn, which I'm not sure if you know, but he's one of these, there's nobody in the United States that knows more about Al-Qaeda than Tom Jocelyn.
Right.
Well, he's with, he writes in the Long War Journal. Sorry, I was trying to think of the name of his, where he writes at.
That's a great website, by the way. The Long War Journal is a phenomenal website and has great writers, and there's so much that people can learn from going on there. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, and then also people didn't understand about the connection to Iran, and so that was one of the things that we talked about on our history of Al-Qaeda was Al-Qaeda's history with Iran. Specifically, it's highly likely that Soleimani was actually harboring Al-Qaeda himself, and he had to have known about it. And the Quds Force, were involved, so and still are involved. So this is not, and Tom Jocelyn was one of the ones who broke that story. So to have him on, we talked about that a year ago. So I have found, the bottom line is it's a way for me to reach people on topics that I think are interesting. Okay, doesn't mean I like them. They're things I'm interested in, and they're things I think people should be thinking about in the future. As the top Republican on the Intelligence Committee. And also I serve on the Ways and Means Committee where we do trade and tax policy and healthcare policy. So it's we try to keep it fun. We do it. So sometimes I'm doing it in my district where we do it on location. Mm-hmm. Other times I'll have to do it somewhere else wherever I can get the person on the phone to do the podcast. If it's a certain expert that I want to try to bring on. Mm-hmm. And that's so I think I'm pretty much the only congressman that I know of that's actually doing a podcast, and for sure the only one that has any level of listeners.
Well, that's what I think is so phenomenal here. I mean, you're the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. You have been so effective over the last 3 years, and I'm going to jump right into this because the mainstream media in the beginning, and I remember first coming into your office years ago, walking around the halls of Congress, and here's, Devin Nunes, who was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. I was working on these stories regarding Russia and the FBI's investigation. Your committee was doing a deep dive investigation into all these issues, particularly the FBI's handling of its probe into the Trump campaign and the now debunked absolutely debunked theory that there was any conspiracy with Russia. But the mainstream media targeted you. Not only did the mainstream media, but others, websites like, I'll bring up some reporters' names like Natasha Bertrand, BuzzFeed, CNN. I can go on and on and on. And now the Michael Horowitz report, the IG report, basically vindicated your entire investigation and your committee's investigation. In fact, your investigation was really the platform that basically pulled out all of the evidence that was necessary for the DOJ and the IG to continue its investigation into what was malfeasance at the FBI and basically an attempted coup by former members of the Obama administration. You have a lawsuit right now against CNN, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Can you fill me in on what's going on and the reason for the lawsuit?
Well, let me first credit you, Sarah. It has been years ago now. It's kind of weird to say, but yeah, it's three years ago that this essentially started. And I remember, you were one of the few that were walking the halls of Congress. And when I say few, less than 5, okay? And I remember at the time, I think you and John Solomon were working together.
Right.
And that's the first time I remember seeing anyone in the halls of Congress other than the mainstream media who were all in on that Trump was a Russian agent, and essentially they just turned me into a Russian agent, and these freaks would chase me around the Capitol. And so I remember you and John Solomon as the only two that were not bought off at some level with the Russia hoax, right? I mean, because I don't want to say that every single reporter that walks around the Capitol was a Russia hoaxer, but even the ones that were not in on it, right? You have different levels of Russia hoaxers, right? You have the ones who were actually in on it, they knew that this came from Fusion GPS, and they had to know it came from Hillary Clinton because they were writing about it in 2016. Okay,
that's it. Yeah.
So those are the full-blown Russia hoaxers, and it's amazing they try to even pretend that they're not. And then you had this, which is 90% of the media, that were essentially rooting for Trump to be a Russian agent. They didn't know anything about Russia. They never covered anything about Russia, and they didn't have time to figure out that, I had been one of the few Russia hawks in Congress, okay, for the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, last decade, really, right?
Right.
And so I'm sitting there listening to people who don't know a damn thing about Russia sit there and look at me and ask me stupid question after stupid question about Russia and Trump. And it's where have you fools been? And it was in the spring of 2016 that I had come out and said the biggest intelligence failure by our intelligence community since 9/11 was our failure to understand Putin's plans and intentions. That was in the spring of 16.
I remember that very clearly.
At the very same time that Fusion GPS and company and the FBI and all the dirty cops were all in the process of framing an investigation on the Trump campaign. So I mean, it was ludicrous then. It's ludicrous now. And anyway, I just want to say thank you for being one of the very few at the very beginning. And gradually we built up a few more. And I would say there's probably about a dozen reporters that over time that were not Russia hoaxers. Okay?
Right, great reporters like Lee Smith, who just wrote a phenomenal book based on your investigation, your committee's investigation into this, and there's others out there with the Federalist.
Yeah, Rowan Scarborough, the Federalist, Washington Times. I mean, there were a few at the Examiner. Very, very few though. But you and John Solomon were basically the first.
That's right. I remember.
Actually skeptical.
We would be sitting in the green room at Fox, or we would be working out in the beat, and we would see reporters coming up to us, and then a few that actually really liked me, but they were still very skeptical, saying, "Sarah, are you sure about that? Are you sure about Andy McCabe? I mean, really, everything that you're saying is going to put you on the line. You realize if you're wrong, your career is over." And I said, "Well, you realize that I usually have multiple sources on every story, so I'm telling you I'm right." And And at that point, I just said, this is it. I mean, but it's like being up against a beast, right, Congressman? Yeah. You're up against a machine, and it's not easy. I mean, there were many nights I would go home, and my heart would just sink because I would know that everything that I reported was accurate, but I'm still up against this monster machine that hated Trump, that hated every single thing that I was writing because they felt that it helped Trump. And I know you went through that same type of backlash, those same issues in the beginning. And there was a recent story by CNN where they tried to basically claim, based off of the attorney of Lev Parnas, that you had visited Vienna to meet with this Ukrainian prosecutor, Viktor Shoikin, to gather dirt on Joe Biden. By the way, we don't need to go to Vienna to gather dirt on Joe Biden. Joe Biden gathers enough dirt on his own and puts it out there publicly. So you immediately denounced that.
And so the first thing with all that is that when you think back, before we go to the CNN piece, I actually want to. You reminded me of a funny story, which I think is funny, talking about kind of the beginnings of the Russia hoax in 2017. I had a reporter that I've known a long time, mainstreamer, probably didn't fully drink the Russia hoax Kool-Aid, but comes up to me and says, this is probably 4 or 5 months in, after I had discovered that there was unmaskings that had occurred, right? And it was, Obama, and it was in the hundreds. Obama administration was doing it. We knew that Fusion GPS was no good. By that time, I couldn't say anything, but we actually knew that they had used the dossier to get a FISA warrant, even though we couldn't, it would be not till January, February of 2018 that we can even reveal that to the American public. But I had a reporter that comes up to me and says, oh, man, I feel so bad for you. You had such a great career, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, I feel bad for you, like you and all these freaks. And it was like at that point, it's like if this guy knows me for 15 years and you feel bad for me because my career's over, it's like, screw you,
That's right.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm just finished. And I don't talk now. That was kind of like the final straw, was like even when like kind of the guys I knew that were normal were saying, oh, my career's over. It's like, okay, if that's how you're thinking and you're not even a Russia hoax Kool-Aid drinker, I really don't need to talk to you anymore.
Well, and that's
when I became, and that's kind of when I started I need to do a podcast, right? I need to get out to my constituents and people all over America. Hey, what's really going on out here? And so I see the CNN story as really the last gasp of the dirty cops, the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, all of the people that were out there smearing me for the better part of 3 years. This was their last gasp. So let's start with if I went to Vienna to meet with anyone, most people know that as the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, that's my job, okay? So I meet with foreigners on a daily basis, and the American people pay me to do it, and my constituents elect me to do it. That's what they should expect me to do. I mean, it's kind of it's an interesting job, but in the intelligence world, we got to meet with people that a lot of times that are both good, but most of the time not so good, right? So
that's right. It's the same as a journalist. I mean, sometimes I'm out there and I'm trying to decipher what's truth, what's not truth. I have to meet with sources. I meet with sources in Pakistan. I have to talk to people. Sometimes I've talked to the Taliban. I've actually called them for comment, and to see how the hostages were doing or what was going on as far as like negotiations with the U.S. Does not mean for one iota that I support them, that I even believe in them. I mean, I'm doing my job to get information and present it to the public.
Exactly, Sarah. And so I meet with, I spend a lot of time meeting with people that that our government, right, as a government, that we're trying to get them on our side, right, or you're trying to negotiate out like some policy disagreements to maybe that would lead to hostage releases that would lead to maybe some areas if we don't get along in every area, say we disagree 8 out of 10 times, but maybe there's 2 out of those 10 times where even though you're not an ally of the United States, maybe there's an area where we can get agreement that someday might lead to us being allies, right?
Right.
So that's the type of it's been historically very interesting work. I've enjoyed it. So the bottom line is, if I was in Vienna in 2018 meeting with Shokin, which, by the way, it wasn't Shokin at the first. It was first this guy Firtash, okay? That would be totally fine. There would be nothing wrong with it. So the story in and of itself is idiotic, right? That he's meeting with Shokin, he's meeting with Ukrainians, he's meeting with Russians, whoever the hell it is, whatever their conspiracy theory is, the bottom line is that's what I do. That's what I get paid to do. But in this case,
did you?
The funny thing is, I didn't even know who the hell Shokin or Firtash was. It's really, I think later down the line, I think I had heard of their names. But what we were most interested in and why we were, conducting an investigation into Ukraine and continue to about Ukraine's involvement in the 2016 election is because we knew that the Clinton campaign and the DNC had operatives that were working closely with high-ranking Ukrainian officials, including the Ukrainian ambassador in the United States, to dirty up the Trump campaign in 2016. We knew pieces of the Steele dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign came from Ukrainian sources. That's why we were interested in Ukraine.
Well, and now Ukraine...
Where the hell CNN came up with that I was in Vienna meeting with first Firtash, and then, the news media first said we were getting questions about Firtash. CNN eventually went with Shokin for whatever reason, and they used a single source of a guy who's been indicted, which is like rule number one. If you're the media, if a guy's been indicted on something, you don't use him as a source if he's trying to get out of trouble. It's completely against all the norms. Especially CNN, which is a major this is a major U.S. company owned by AT&T, which is one of the largest companies in the United States.
That's right, and you're suing them for $435 million. Is that it?
That's right.
That's huge. That's huge. Any developments on that front as far as the courts? Are you moving forward, or is there?
Well, they have. I think they owe a response to us this month, in later in January, and I'll just say, this is. Remember when that story first broke, I just said, I can't believe this is happening. I completely denied it. I said I think my exact words were demonstrably false, okay, which that by definition, there is not a stronger denial than that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But that essentially means it's entirely false. And I said, gave them 10 days, 11 days to retract the story. The timing of it was designed to hurt the Republican Party, to hurt the president, because it was after Adam Schiff and Pelosi completely flamed out with their impeachment process. We embarrassed them on national television for 2 weeks straight. So they concocted this story to do damage. It was to damage the president. It was to damage me. It was to damage because I was the messenger.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was designed to do. And they were really sloppy and really stupid because it wasn't just Firtash's, or not Firtash, but Parnas's lawyer or Parnas himself. They didn't come up with this story.
No, they didn't.
And that's going to be their ultimate problem. So CNN, who was real hot to get a hold of me, now they have yet to, number one, retract, but they haven't even said a damn thing. So all these media people were so hot to jump on this story, so hot to ask questions. Now that I'm in federal court, they can agree any day in federal court so that we can have discovery, so that I can get to the bottom of where did you get this garbage from. And if they're so damn sure about their story, they can subpoena me, right? They could subpoena me for my travel records, right? Passport. There's lots of things they could go after to figure out if I was in Vienna or not. But the fact of the matter is, I have pictures of myself in Benghazi, which, as you know, is one of the most dangerous places in the world.
Right.
And then also in Malta, picking up a fallen World War II soldier and making sure he got home to the United States of America. At the same time, the fools and scam artists at CNN were claiming that I was in Vienna doing these supposedly nefarious things that even if I had been, wouldn't have been nefarious anyway.
Well, this is it, Congressman. When I think about this is how they operate. I've noticed this with the mainstream media. It never used to happen before. But you make a mistake that big on a news article, just like the New York Times did during the Russia investigation, which, by the way, the New York Times, Washington Post winning Pulitzers for some of this. They make huge, egregious errors. And then they don't ever retract. They don't ever back down. They sit it out there like it actually happened. I want you to hear this because Ukraine...
Well, that's a good point. Before you play that, you need to... That's an important point, though. A lot of people say, well, why are you suing for so much? Well, number one, these guys can keep this hanging out there for years and years and years, so that the cost can rise into the millions just in my legal fees, right? So the only way is to, and they refuse to retract. It's not just CNN that's refusing to retract. I've got numerous lawsuits out there of people that are refusing to retract these stories. The only way this is going to get fixed is the courts will have to step in and will have to enforce, defamation law, which if you go back in time and look, it's really the oldest law we have on the books, because if we can go out and defame each other as citizens of this of the United States or any country in the world, and it's why this common law goes back, I think, 800 years, okay? Goes back to the Magna Carta, is because if your neighbors, if you start saying bad things that aren't true about each other and it starts to hurt your business or your livelihood or your friendships, it leads and escalates quickly to violence. That's why these defamation laws are on the books.
Well, and it's so
the fact that the media won't retract these stories when CNN knows damn well I wasn't in Vienna, didn't know Firtash, didn't know Barnes. It's asinine.
Well, it is. And I want to reiterate before I play this clip, because Ukraine did lead to impeachment in the House, a very partisan impeachment. But I want to say really quick to the listeners out there, it is such an egregious, hugely defamatory mistake when people, and not even mistake, I think these mainstream media outlets are doing it on purpose. It's almost like a disinformation campaign, and it actually damages the nation. It rips apart our foundation and our structure, especially if people are now weaponizing the media in such a way, people from within our own country. This isn't about Russia, targeting Facebook or targeting Twitter or having bots. This is about people within our own system, the media complicit with people, former heads of the FBI, former heads of the CIA like John Brennan, James Clapper, and others who have basically used the media to defame and to target the President of the United States, to target the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, to target conservative journalists, and they use it as a weapon, and it is so dangerous. It is the beginning of the end if you don't stop it, because really, in order to run an operation like this overseas, and I've said this over and over again, if the CIA were to run an operation, a disinformation campaign operation against a world leader overseas, they would literally have to have executive authority by the president, because it's a lethal operation. When you spread malicious lies and rumors, or when you call a world leader a clear and present danger, you can literally destroy, break a nation in two. People get targeted. People are under threat. So these are issues that go far beyond just a small case of defamation, or that, this is about actually a place that we trust, an institution, the Fourth Estate. It's about being able to go to the paper and say, okay, what the Washington Post wrote is accurate, because we know it's been double-checked and triple-checked. Okay, what the New York Times wrote is accurate, or what CNN is writing is accurate. Now what we're getting is a bunch of mud being slung around, and people just that don't like this administration just posting lies left and right. I want to play a clip really quick right here of Lindsey Graham yesterday. He was talking about the impeachment proceedings and what to do about Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House.
What I would do if she continues to refuse to send the articles as required by the Constitution, I would work with Senator McConnell to change the rules of the Senate so we could start the trial without her if necessary.
What do you think?
Well, unlike Pelosi, I'm not going to get in the Senate's business. Okay, so let's start with that. But this whole impeachment is a joke. So let's not forget, because they ran this impeachment this way. I mean, you're talking about impeaching the President of the United States. There are long-term historical ramifications for their actions here. It's inexcusable, and this is also the media's fault. Okay, and the media is just an arm of the Democrats. Okay, that's just so people understand that. I think people that are listening to your podcast know that, but
they do.
This is so dangerous, because you have the impeachment of the President of the United States without any evidence of a crime, but then you refuse to allow Republicans, the minority party, or the president to have witnesses come in and testify. Okay? So that in and of itself makes this wrong. And if the shoe was on the other foot and Republicans were doing this, we would get laughed out of town. And even our, if you want to say Sean Hannity and the Fox News guys and some of the conservative guys, they would have destroyed us, Republicans. They would have said, no, you have to allow, Barack Obama the right to bring in whoever he wants to bring in to defend him. Sean Hannity would have said that. Okay?
Oh, he would have. Absolutely.
So Rush Limbaugh, I'm just thinking of names of the most conservative, Mark Levin, all the well-known, most conservative names. Our own supporters would have told the Republicans, no, you're not doing this in the House like this. You will allow them to do this. So the media didn't do that. So this whole thing is it's worse than the scam because it's so dangerous. And so I don't know. You asked me what the Senate should do. I don't really care. I mean, I just think I just think this is so dangerous. The quicker this is over, the better. We really do need to hear from the whistleblower.
Whistleblower, yes.
And the fact that the Democrats won't release the transcript of us interviewing the Inspector General Atkinson that brought this scam forward. Everyone needs to see that testimony, and the reason that it's not being released is because it's very damaging, not only to the whistleblower but also to Atkinson, himself. His testimony is really bad, and that's another. I mean, the Republicans have an active investigation into Atkinson.
So the Republicans have an active investigation into Atkinson. I don't think people have heard that enough or heard it at all, actually. We've mentioned it, but I think people have just kind of ignored it because, of course, we don't have the subpoena power, so we can't bring Atkinson back in. But he's got serious questions to answer for because I believe that he was either lied to Congress or he really needs to correct his statements. And he's refused to respond. Myself, Jim Jordan, and Kevin McCarthy sent a letter to him asking him for a very specific response. He gave us a typical IC response, which is to not answer the question. Well, 3 years ago, that might have worked. It doesn't work with us anymore. So he is under active investigation. I'm not going to go any farther than that because, obviously he has a chance to come in and prove his innocence. But my guess is Schiff, Atkinson, they don't want that transcript out because it's very damaging. Do you think we're going to get our hands on that transcript? Do you think it could be made public?
Well, look, being that it hasn't been made public yet, why would it not be? And nobody in the media is calling for it.
You
think they would. You'd think they would be. But I've talked about it on television. John Ratcliffe's talked about it on television. There's very few of us actually know what's in the transcript. But yeah, it's a major problem.
Wow, that's huge news. That's huge. And then I'm going to jump really quick because you just gave me so much to work with. But I don't want to forget this. Specifically dealing with Attorney General William Barr and John Durham's investigation. I want to play a clip really quick of William Barr here, and I want you to comment on what he has to say.
Well, Durham is looking at the whole waterfront. He is looking at the issue of how it got started. He's looking at whether or not the narrative of Trump being involved in the Russian interference actually preceded July and wasn't, in fact, the precipitating trigger for the investigation. He's also looking at the conduct of the investigation. There are some things that were done in the investigation that are not included in Horowitz's report, and he's looking at those things. But also, a few weeks ago, I told him that he should spend just as much attention on the post-election period. And I did that because of some of the stuff that Horowitz has uncovered.
I think that's so significant. I mean, he's talking about the prior to the investigation beginning on July 31st, which I think a lot of us who have been covering this for years realize that the Crossfire Hurricane July 31st, 2016 date doesn't fly, and then looking at the post-investigation. What are your thoughts on what William Barr is saying, what he's doing? I know Horowitz validated a lot of your committee's investigation into this issue, particularly issues that were targeted by investigators like Kash Patel and others on your team. But can you talk a little bit about how you feel about what William Barr is going and where John Durham's going?
Well, it's nice to have an adult in the room now at the Department of Justice, and what he says speaks for itself. I think it's probably a lot of your listeners already know this, but you alluded to it. But we know for a fact that the FBI and DOJ have been lying for a long time that this investigation it didn't start July 31st of 2016. It just didn't. And, they can weasel word in. They can use all the legal words they want. They can say they don't want they're not going to accept to have their clearance restored. But the bottom line is that they misled and they lied to Congress over and over and over again, both, as we began our investigation all the way through to the end of it. And look, the chickens are coming home to roost. And there is no possible way that Carter Page gets invited to, and others get invited to an event in June of 2016 by the same spy ring that is actually heavily investigating and spying on the Trump campaign in the fall of 16. It's 100% impossible.
Yeah, you can't even play the lottery.
The FBI didn't. Yeah, right. The FBI didn't know about that. So we need to know. I always say, what are we going to? Is anybody going to pay the price? I mean, I sure hope so. But what we really need are answers. I mean, these are government agencies using government dollars, and if investigating political actors, Republicans in this case. We should have every single piece of this story. Everything should be made public. Whatever the hell they were doing in late 2015, early 2016, we should know about it. And I'm glad that we've got adults in the room that are looking at this.
Yeah, so do I. I think it's so important for the American people. I think the American people want to know the truth. They need to know the truth. It is the only way to save our nation from a very damaging future. I mean, you cannot have a republic where you do not trust, or a democracy where you can't trust the institutions, specifically federally armed officers with the FBI or intelligence officers in the CIA and senior level officials. You can't give them this kind of power and not be able to trust that they're not going to step all over the Constitution and violate people's Fourth Amendment rights and our other rights, Congressman. I want to give you the last word. I thank you for giving me so much time today. I know you're a busy man. There's so much happening. I'd like to get your thoughts on what's happening right now with Iran before we close out, and then I'm going to let you take it from there, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll let you get back to work.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me on, and I want to, obviously, once again, thank you for all your great work that you did, and I wish that you and a handful of others would win Pulitzers, but at least in my book, and I think many Republicans and conservatives across the country, there's a handful of you that all deserve awards, and I know you'll never get it from the mainstream media, but then again, maybe you don't want to get it from the mainstream media.
Yeah, that's okay. People are my reward enough, as long as they read our stories and we can, educate the American public and not let these detractors and these people who have put out this false information destroy our country. I think that's reward enough. Yeah, no, I think it is, but it's still, you guys did a great job. And I'll just to close out, my thought on Iran is this: we're in this position with Iran. Number one, going back to, and I was there at the time, so I was in Congress. We made a lot of mistakes. But I think if you, and I know you were covering this topic then also at the time, but we made mistakes back in 2004 and 5 and 6 and ongoing. So I'm saying in the Bush administration, right, by not taking the Iranian threat in Iraq seriously and treating it as a military and terrorist threat.
we went about nation building instead of using our military for what it's been built to do, and that is to bring people to justice and enforce power and enforce our security. And we got into nation building early on, and it just failed left and right. So Soleimani should have been destroyed a long time ago. The Quds Force should have been dealt with a long time ago, and instead we've kind of piecemealed it here and there. And I think we're paying a price for what really began before September 11th, continued on through the Iraq War, and then, of course, the Obama administration just put it on steroids of stupidity by giving them billions of dollars and in cash, of all things, U.S. dollars, and then continuing to violate the Logan Act, right?
That's what they do. We saw John Kerry. John Kerry is
I'm not enforcing the Logan Act. So I don't want people to go crazy. It's just a joke. But John Kerry can do whatever he wants.
That's right.
But the bottom line is the Democratic Party. If you thought things couldn't get nuttier at the end of 2019, which I actually didn't think they could get any nuttier, we started out 2020 with the entire Democratic Party supporting Soleimani, who's a terrorist and the leader of the terrorist movement for the largest state sponsor of terrorism, the Iranian regime, is just absolutely incredible. But it's dangerous. It's just dangerous. Nobody should be saying anything except what should be said, which is, thank God this guy is gone. And it's too bad for the thousands of Americans that have been killed or injured directly by the Iranian regime, directly by Soleimani, and that's what they should be saying. Thank God he's gone.
Thank God he's gone, because you're right. I saw it with my own eyes while I covered the war in Afghanistan, and I saw it with my own eyes covering the war in Iraq. I saw Iranian influence all over the ground, training, the building of weapons, assisting the Taliban, assisting al-Qaeda. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is what they say over and over again. And if we don't learn to think the same way, we got to stop putting our own personal cultural appropriation, or however anybody wants to call that, on others. We have to realize that we do have enemies out there that want to target the United States, that want to see our destruction, that want to kill our civilians, and we have to be willing, and thank God we have an administration that wants to fight back and protect our people so we don't end up having another Benghazi, or so that we don't end up in a major world war. And remember, folks, I know, because I am the wife of a U.S. soldier that was almost killed in combat, that was wounded, who lost his eyesight and lives every day without ever seeing anything, but lives on and is strong and amazing. And I ask him all the time, would you go back? Would you do it again? And he says, yes, I would. I'd be willing to do that. So remember, our servicemen and women out there, congressmen, are willing to fight, and they're willing to fight to protect this nation and to stop these terrorists from destroying our way of life, our citizens, our assets overseas. So thank you so much, Congressman Nunes.
Thank you so much. Obviously, I was thinking about that when I was saying it, because I knew your husband had been injured. So thank you for his service, and thank you for your continued service for getting the truth out there.
Oh, and I'll continue to do that. And everybody, please listen. Go on, download the Devin Nunes podcast. Remember, it's Nunes. It's not Nunez, although I like saying that. And the Devin Nunes podcast, it will inform you. It will educate you. You'll find out what's going on. You'll get it straight from the horse's mouth, and you won't have to go through the Washington Post or the New York Times or anybody else for that information. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, Sarah.
You got it. That was just such an incredible interview, and the breaking stories. Congressman Nunes is somebody that I have so much respect for, and I want to thank him, first of all, for remembering our troops and our service members who are overseas, and for my husband. Oh, I have some news for you all, but by the way, first, Anybody who's out there, I would love to hear from you. I want to know how you're all doing, what you think of the podcast. I want to talk about the stories that mean something to you. So before I get to me and what I think is important, I want to hear from you. I want you to contact me on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, or send me an email, or come onto my website and leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking, because I really, really care about you. I care about this country. I care about what you care about. And maybe we don't always agree. Maybe you disagree with me on something. I want to hear that too. That's okay. We can disagree, and we can discuss, and we can talk, and I can bring on guests that you would like to hear, people with your point of view, or somebody who is maybe completely the opposite of your point of view. Just want to hear what they have to say. Whatever it is, please contact me and let me know. You know, I want to get back to something that Congressman Nunes said. He thanked, my husband for his service, and I didn't even get a chance to talk about this at the beginning of the podcast, but my husband's service dog, so my husband was completely blinded in Afghanistan, can't see a thing, poor guy. He says it's like walking through a cave. That's how he described it to me the first time. But he has been amazing. He was wounded in 2011. And he went back to work several years after going through rehab and being at home for a bit, and he got a service dog. So this is so important, guys, because service animals, particularly guide dogs, are so important, especially when you've lost your eyesight. They not only are your second set of eyes, but they're a partner. They hang out with you. They become a part of your family. So Kenny is our beautiful Goldador. He's a golden retriever, Labrador mix, who is now 9 years old, and he is retiring. And he had a big retirement party actually at work. Everybody there threw this big retirement party. My husband, Marty, said Kenny got more presents than anybody has ever gotten at work, more hugs and kisses, more love than anybody who ever retired out of his office. It was crazy. I mean, they got him a T-shirt. They put out a big tablecloth. Everybody signed it. He had all these little dog treats and dog toys. But it wasn't about, of course, Kenny probably was just like, whoa, why is everyone paying attention to me? This is awesome. He was very excited when he got home because apparently he got a lot of treats. And boy, did we pay for it that night, because, whoo, that was a long night for us. But anyways, no, I'm not going to throw out any Eric Swalwell jokes, but just to say, we paid the price for all the treats. But the thing is that Kenny brought so much love to everybody in the office. Animals play such an important role in our lives. They are our friends, even when we're down, even when we're at our worst, they're there for us. Even when we're happy, they're extra happy for us. I mean, I want to hear about your pets. Maybe that could be like a new thing on the show, right? On the podcast show. Maybe hearing about pets that have changed your life, or maybe a pet saved your life, or maybe a pet just hangs out with you every day and makes you feel awesome. I don't know, but I know Kenny makes us feel awesome. And the big announcement here is that we are actually getting a new service dog, a new guide dog. Now, I saw a picture of him today. I can say him. He is a lab, and he's beautiful. We won't know for sure if he's staying with our family, and we got to give it 1 week. But my husband called me, super excited. He's actually at Southeastern Guide Dog School in Florida. They are amazing. They're a nonprofit. They do so much work with our soldiers and with people who have been blinded, and especially for our U.S. veterans. Boy, Southeastern Guide Dog School, thank you for making our life so special, and for making my husband so independent and getting him back to where he can feel that he can do things on his own. You have been awesome. Anyway, so we're getting a new dog, and these dogs are super special. Remember, you can't run up and pet them when they're guiding someone. There's little things, but when my husband takes them off the harness, believe me, they're everybody's favorite dog. So anyways, I wanted to thank you for that. Thank you, Congressman Nunes, for not forgetting our troops. Thank you for not forgetting that we could be on the brink of something we don't know. But for all the servicemen and women who are traveling overseas, for all of those who are in our intelligence community, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm about in tears right now because I love y'all so much. And you never know what can happen. But I want you to know one thing. Please, please, please don't forget the families. Don't forget the children of those who are fighting overseas or those who are serving our nation overseas. They really are the heroes in all of this. They hold down the fort and they live for long periods of time without their dads or moms. So please don't forget them. And don't forget to thank a service member. So if you're at the airport or you're in a grocery store line or you're shopping and you see a service member, you know what? Just go up to them, even if they're old. I was in the grocery store the other day. I saw two men wearing their hats, former Navy, and, just tell them thank you so much for your service. And, by the way, don't forget to thank a police officer, too. Thank anyone and everyone who puts their life on the line every day for you to ensure that we live in this great nation and that we keep this great nation the way it is. By the way, thank you so much for coming to the Sara Carter Show. You know how much I love you all out there. Remember, I'm a fellow with the Independent Women's Forum. Visit them at the Independent Women's Forum online and come to SaraACarter.com. Jenny Terra's stories are posted there as well. That's SaraACarter.com. And visit me on Twitter and follow me on Twitter at Sara Carter DC. Sara Carter DC. That's where all the top stories are. Subscribe and give me a 5-star rating on your podcast app. I would love it. We love to hear that. Again, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to be with you, and it's going to be great to be back with you. We're taking back the story, folks.